and welcome back to the Learning Pod, an Epicor podcast. I'm your host, Roxanne Rodriguez. Thanks for tuning in today. Have you ever thought about how powerful feedback can be in shaping your career? In today's episode, join me and our guests as we dive into a conversation focused on the art of giving and receiving feedback. Please welcome my first guest, Julia Nightingale, Senior Manager of Demand Generation, coming from our UK Bracknell office. Julia is a seasoned B2B marketing leader with 20 years of experience driving revenue growth in enterprise tech and fintech organizations, specializing in demand generation. Please also welcome from our Monterrey, Mexico office, Raul Suarez, Senior Manager of Customer Support. Raul has been a dedicated team member for the past 19 years here with us at Epicor. With a remarkable 28 years of experience in customer service, Raul is passionate about delivering exceptional support to both internal and external customers. Thank you all both so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
So feedback can be a challenging topic, so I'm really excited to gain a new understanding of this very essential skill. First off, I know that giving feedback can be a very challenging task for managers, and I'm sure that there are several misconceptions and fears that can really hinder their ability to provide effective feedback. So, Julia, I want to start with you. What misconceptions or fears cause managers to struggle with giving feedback?
Yeah. I think let me start by saying the best feedback isn't just about what needs fixing. It should reinforce positive behaviours by acknowledging what's being done well, providing encouragement to the team that they've done a good job. I think the misconception that most managers have is that many managers equate feedback with pointing out mistakes rather than seeing it as a balanced tool for growth and recognition. Many avoid feedback to prevent awkwardness or emotional reactions, especially if they dislike confrontation or thinking feedback will lower morale or confidence, especially if the employee is already struggling.
And Raul, what about you? Do you know of any misconceptions or fears that either you experience as a manager or just managers in general?
I guess when thinking about it, the first thing that came to mind is because I've seen it with coworkers, managers, and people I know, it's the fear of conflict with the employee. I've seen managers, I've been one of them in the past, that struggle with the fear of giving the difficult or having the difficult conversations. So that's the thing. Not knowing how the person is going to take it, I think it's one of the biggest ones that come to mind. But again, like Julia said, it's important. If you ever seen yourself in a situation like this one in which you don't know how to approach, the best thing to do is, like she said, keep in mind that both parties need to appreciate what's the intent of feedback. It's not criticizing, but helping you overcome something or help you get better at something.
And I really like how you approached it from kind of like that growth mindset. And I hear also, Julia, what you had said about, we sometimes confuse feedback with just giving criticism. I know what I have learned about feedback is sometimes there can be like three main components: the appreciative feedback, where you're praising them, and then the coaching feedback, where we're trying to build skills, and then that constructive feedback, where we're trying to initiate growth. But sometimes I know that when we're giving feedback, sometimes we're receiving it and it truly is constructive, but then sometimes there's that blurry line of going into plain criticism.
Yeah.
I know constructive feedback is intended to assist and enhance, whereas criticism just offers a lot of negativity and it's essentially just unhelpful. So we'll start with Raul for this one. How do you differentiate between constructive feedback and just plain criticism?
I guess that to me, the main difference is when you're not detailed, when you are being subjective in your approach, that would be criticism. I feel that feedback needs to be detailed, focused, and objective, of course. It's like, I don't know, for example, working with customers, it would be very easy for me to approach a situation in which a customer complains about an email that you received from one person from my team. If I go to this person, if I tell him, you know what, I don't think you're very good at writing emails to customers, that would feel like criticism. I'm telling the person is not good at dealing with customers. So in a situation like this, you want to be detailed in what the problem is. Like, try that as opposed to, you know what, I've noticed that when you send emails to customers and you want to highlight things, you use capital letters or bold or red coloring. why don't you try something different? Why don't you try this or why don't you try that? But then you would be giving a person something to act on rather than criticizing without providing a way to go forward. That would be the big difference to me.
And I actually hear you on that because one thing that you brought up that stood out to me was observations. What are you observing? What is the actual behavior that you're observing? And then offering either a question or offering some helpful tip on how they can kind of flip that into something else. So I think it really does come from that direct observation rather than just like you said, something short and quick like, hey, you write bad emails, So there's definitely a difference between the two. Julia, what about you? What do you consider the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, look, very similar. I think from my perspective, I think the difference between constructive feedback and criticism often lies in the intent, tone, and usefulness of the conversation. So we've got to remember the purpose is to help an individual grow or improve. The tone should always be respectful, supportive, and solution orientated. It should also help you focus on, clear, like observable behaviors or outcomes, just like what you've said, and should provide guidance and offer suggestions on how to improve, right? And the feedback, once again, should always be balanced. It should also include recognition of what's working well. So I think there is, it's a fear with most people not to step over the line between criticism and constructive. But I think that if there is a goal and an objective around it, then the solution is rectified.
I really like, Julia, how you mentioned about tone. I think that even sometimes in my everyday conversations with friends, family members, partner, I can forget that my tone actually hits deep and it also can really affect how someone feels. So I think being mindful of the tone, being mindful of the observations that we're taking when we go into these conversations, I think if we're more mindful of all of those different aspects, we're able to deliver a message more clearly and also more objectively, like Raul, you were saying.
Well, I would say, just to add, that it's often knowing how your team will react. So you've got to know your team inside out to how they deal with either criticism or, I mean, it's not criticism, or constructive criticism. Some people can take it really personally. And if that be the case, I'm quite mindful of that, of how I have those types of conversations, where other members of my team or people that I've managed previously have said, how did I do? They've been very open. They want the feedback, right? It's harder for those individuals that don't potentially want the feedback. That I think makes that conversation sometimes even more difficult.
And I think that that's great is having, you have to know who you're talking to. You have to be able to have that trust with your team and for them to have that trust with you that you're giving them honest and reasonable feedback, which kind of leads me into my next question about the tactical approaches of giving feedback. So, Raul, what techniques do you use to deliver feedback clearly and actionably?
Well, I don't know if these would be techniques. I can tell you from experience what I try to do. First of all, and I think that the most important thing is that it should always be on a one-on-one session individually, never in front of a group of people. I have seen it happen to me that sometimes you have something that you think it's quick and it's not harmful, and you go to the person's desk and tell them, hey, remember we talked about this, this, and that. And then after that, once a person told me, you know what, Raul, thank you for that, but can you try to do that on a one-on-one session in the future? Because I felt that everyone around was looking at me and what you were saying. So even if it's not harmful, you don't know how they will feel or how they will take it.
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing is do it individually in a one-on-one session. And another thing, and an important, a big one, would be to plan ahead. We have been discussing that you have to be careful with the tone, that you have to be detailed, that you have to be objective, but you also want to know what you're trying to accomplish in that session. If you come with your feedback, but you don't plan ahead and you don't set the expectation of what behavior needs to change or what the result should be that you are expecting, then that's not going to be useful for the person. So always individually, plan ahead and set expectations right. And I guess understanding what's next will make the whole difference. Also, not mixing positive and negative feedback. Like you said, that's another thing I try to do. If you are going to do positive, do positive. If you also have negative, do that separately on a separate occasion, a separate session. You don't want to mix those. And I don't know, there must be others, but right now those are like the ones that came to mind.
Yeah, I definitely think planning ahead is going to be essentially crucial. And I actually know that in our previous episode, we actually talk about how to plan ahead when we have these difficult conversations. So it's really great being able to kind of see the evolution of how planning goes into so many different assets of our work and how we communicate. Julia, I know you had talked about knowing your team and building that trust. What other techniques do you have that you use to deliver feedback clearly?
Yeah, so I think giving feedback as soon as possible after the event while it's relevant. Yeah, because this helps the person that you're having the conversation with connect with the feedback to their actions. We're all human, we're all emotive. So, Raul, I know you'd said about not mixing positive with it's not negative, it's more constructive. So
Yeah.
what I tend to do is provide feedback that will start with a positive, because good's always good, and then combined with constructive feedback, right? So an example of that is, one of your team is presenting to a group of individuals on Teams. They're nervous, they've rushed the content, and they've talked too fast. So in that instance, my constructive feedback would be your content was really, really strong, but with a little bit more eye contact and slower pacing, your delivery would be even more engaging. So start with the positive and then moving to this is how I think you could improve this.
And I think that's wonderful, both having both perspectives here. And I think that's also just like we had said about knowing who you are speaking to. And
Mhm.
I think one thing that I've learned is to even ask sometimes, like, do you want me to start with the appreciative feedback? Can I offer you some coaching? Or do you want to know how you could improve? Sometimes even just approaching it in that way, where you go to the person and see what are they ready to accept right now? It could also be a good tool or technique to deliver that feedback. And it will definitely improve the outcomes within the team as well. Now, I want to go on to my next question. I know that we want to encourage managers to also seek feedback and create a comfortable environment. It's vital to, I think, any workplace. So we can start with Julia on this one. How do you ensure managers seek feedback from employees, making the employee comfortable giving feedback to their higher ups?
Yeah. So I think, an open exchange of conversation is encouraged within our organization. We have quarterly employee surveys that address multiple topics, including their management style, culture, work-life balance. So, in that instance, the results are communicated to management first to understand how our team are feeling and to address any concerns and build an action plan to support those needs. So that's a level of, making sure that the employee is feeling comfortable. I mean, in our department, we also encourage skip meetings. So it's a chance for my team to discuss openly with their second line manager any issues, concerns around their role or me as a manager. Feedback should always be two-way, and I support these activities to ensure my team have a voice.
Well, I love how you talk about your team having a voice, because sometimes I know in some work environments, people are afraid to speak up.
Yeah,
They
no one should be
don't
afraid to speak up.
exactly, like they don't want to be punished for maybe feedback that they want to give. And
Yeah.
so I really like how you say have these regular meetings where you've clearly communicated that you're open to your team for feedback. I know when I have my manager one-on-ones on a weekly basis with my manager, the last question that she asks in our one-on-one is, what can I do better for you as a manager? What am I not doing that you would like me to
Okay.
do? She really incorporates those questions. And then it allows me to be like, oh, okay, she's opening the floor for this. So if there is something that I'm needing from her, I can go ahead and speak about it freely and honestly. Raul, what about you?
I agree with everything you've just said. And giving a voice to the people, you have to make sure that you give them the place to express themselves. Something that I've started doing a while ago is having one-on-one meetings with my team. My team is larger. We're about 17 resources in my group, so I cannot afford weekly meetings, so I do monthly. And I will tell you that at first I was afraid that it would take a lot of my time, so I was hesitant to do it. But after I started doing it, yes, it does take a lot of my time, but it's well worth it. At first, people were like coming into the sessions afraid of what is he going to tell to me? What did I do, etc.
Yeah.
And then when you start building trust, even when people don't have topics to discuss and you ask them about their day, which movies they saw on the weekend, if they attended a concert or whatnot, you start building trust. And what I saw after that is that they came into these sessions with their notes, with their requests, with their ideas, their suggestions. So they started inadvertently started giving feedback. And one thing that I believe is key is that you have to nurture that. And you do that by making notes of everything they ask, everything they suggest, and follow up on them. I'm old school, so I use a notebook. And I'm always, as they are speaking, I'm always making annotations on my notebook. And what I do is throughout the month, because we meet monthly, I go over those and try to address as many as I can. And in our next meeting, we can go over those items. And last time you requested this is done, this has been completed. And that helps you build trust with the people. And I brought it up because that's how you start seeing them giving you feedback without you asking for it. That's the way I've seen that works.
Exactly. Building that trust with your team is essential. And I really appreciate how you're having those monthly one-on-one meetings with your team members because, yeah, you can be able to come to the table and you can trust that your manager is going to follow up on what they are asked to do, and then vice versa, since that feedback is from the top down and bottom up as well. So, thank you all so much for that. I know that receiving feedback can sometimes feel very personal, but it's important to also remain objective and view it as an opportunity for growth and improvement. So, how do you not take feedback personally? We can go ahead and start with Julia.
So I think accepting feedback becomes easier as you progress through your career and the more experience you obtain within your job from a confidence perspective. Everyone has areas to improve. Everybody's learning every single day. There's jobs that are given to me that I think, oh my goodness gracious, how am I going to get through this? So there's always ways to improve. Feedback is a tool for development. It's not a sign of failure. It's about maintaining a growth mindset, as I'd said before. I always think that you should always ask the person giving you feedback questions to clarify. So can you give me an example? Or what would you improve? What would improvement look like to you? Feedback is not a personal attack, but a dialogue that helps you continually learn and evolve as an individual.
Wonderful response, Julia. And Raul, how do you not take feedback personally, or what tips would you give to others to not take it personally?
Well, a good friend of mine once told me whenever people complained about work or about the workload or, things related to what we do, and she has this phrase that at first I was like, I know that, but she used to say, it's only work.
Mm.
And I was like, I know it's work, but I'm stressed because of this or other people. But once you understand the true meaning of those few words, you start to learn that these things should not affect you personally. These things are not against you. Like Julie was saying, it's not personal. It's not an attack. It's not a judgment. So my suggestion would be to take feedback as information about the things you do and not something about you as a person. I was reading a book recently and it was very like a very romanticized way of saying it, like think of feedback as a gift. So that would be one way to say it. But yeah, I mean, thinking about that, it's about the things you do would be like paramount. It's a learning opportunity. And I agree with Julia. Ask questions, as many questions as you can. If you don't agree with something, if you do not understand what is being told to you. I have a friend, he doesn't work at Epicor, but he just recently, he's from another state in Mexico. So he sent me this WhatsApp and he was complaining. He was very stressed because his boss was telling him via WhatsApp, not the best way to deliver feedback. And it was something along the line. So how do you not see this? So he was very stressed about it. I don't know what to do. It's always the same thing. So I started asking him the questions that I believed he should have asked until he realized that he wasn't taking the time to check some details that they were asking.
Mhm.
So he was in fact doing something wrong. He was focused on other things, on doing everything else in the right manner, but he was missing that little bit that they always check. So that's what I told him. If you don't understand something, if you're just getting these messages and you're not asking questions on how to improve or what is expected, it's not useful. And you're going to be stressed and angry and desperate because you don't understand what's going on. But it's as simple as, if you don't understand something, ask about it.
That is actually something, your story that you shared actually reminds me of something that someone very special in my life had told me. And she always says to stay curious. And I think that that can be applied from a manager giving feedback, or even like we've been talking about right now, an employee receiving that feedback. Stay curious. If you're confused by the feedback, ask follow-up questions. If you are giving feedback, ask questions to prompt thinking within your employee so that they can start kind of thinking for themselves like, oh, maybe I could improve this, or maybe I do this really well and I didn't even notice it. So I think staying curious within the conversation and asking and incorporating those questions will just improve the feedback from both ways, whether we're giving it or receiving it as well. I want to go on to our last question. Being able to process feedback effectively is key to development. So I'll start with Raul. How do you process feedback once you've received it?
I think it's only natural to react when we are told things that we do not agree with or that we do not believe are happening. So what I try to do is always keep my cool. If there's something I do not agree with, do not fight against it, do not react to it. Just process, again, ask questions. If you feel like what you're being told does not align with what you are seeing, okay, I don't see it. Why is that? Or what are you seeing that I am not? To help me understand.
And sometimes people don't see it. That's the thing,
Yeah.
it's learned behavior. So anyone's behavior could be a certain way, but they don't see it because that's what they've always done. So, so I think that if you're not aware of it, it can feel surprising or emotional, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we talk about asking questions. We've been talking about it, I think, throughout the whole session. But it's a very important thing because sometimes when you ask yourself, it sometimes happens that you yourself find the answer, or you find the solution, or you find the problem. I always tell my team, the senior resources, I always tell them when dealing with people, if you have an idea or if you have something that you want people to do, try as best as possible to make them feel like the idea came from them.
Yeah.
And you do that by asking questions and by encouraging. Yeah, I mean, and it works. One of them told me, I wonder how many times you did that to me. But
It's called reverse psychology, Raul.
Yeah.
It's called reverse psychology.
No, yeah, and it works. I mean, if you give them clarity by answering their questions, by addressing as many doubts they may have, if you do that, that's going to help them better receive the information that you are providing. Another thing, try to repeat the information that you are receiving. Make sure that you're understanding what you're being told, because sometimes our mindsets, when we are receiving feedback, it's somewhere else. And they may be talking about something and you're understanding a totally different thing. So if you are in a position like that, repeat yourself what you're being told and make sure that you are really getting what you are meant to get. And if not, again, make sure that you have all the details and information.
I actually really like that tip because that's something else that I've learned is being able to repeat or rephrase what you heard. Because sometimes, let's say someone's having a bad day and you give them feedback, they're in a bad mood. Their perception of what you're saying may not actually be what was said. So to be able to repeat and be like, can I clarify, this is what I heard. Is that true or not true? Is that correct or not correct? One thing that my director or former director, Tony Checketts, used to do was she would come to us and she would say, are you ready to hear the feedback? Is it a good time right now for me to share this constructive feedback that I had? Because she was
a good idea.
Yeah. Because she was like, if you're having a bad day, who wants to hear feedback? Like, who wants to pile that on?
Yeah.
You could say, can we talk tomorrow? Or can we talk in an hour? Or whatever that may be. Asking people, so that they can take the time to process it later while they're in the best headspace to receive that feedback. Julia, do you want to add anything onto that?
You know what? I don't, because I think we were both saying the same thing. I always say pause and reflect, try not to react immediately. Yeah, because it all becomes very emotive. And again, if something's unclear, ask for examples or specific questions. So, it's been covered.
Another thing that just came to mind, whether you're on the receiving or the giving end, make sure that you have a follow-up session. You want to make sure you follow up on that because your manager may see a change or may see the expected results and he won't tell you because things are working now. But if you are on the receiving end, you will be wondering, how am I doing? They are not telling me anything. Am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? So regardless of where you're at, in which position you're playing in this situation, make sure that you follow up and make sure that all items were covered. If the behavior or situation or whatever thing you were discussing has been corrected, make sure that you let the person know, make sure that they tell you. And if there's still things to work through, same thing.
I also think there's flip reverse on that as well. I'm thinking about me as an employee with my boss. If I've been given feedback on something, I may deliver a presentation and then afterwards I'd say to Natalie, how do you think I did? Am I better than last time? Did I improve based on, the recommendations you'd given me? So, I think it's a two-way conversation from both parties.
I think that's actually something that I didn't really think about, is that following up, that checking back in, whether you're in the employee checking back in with your manager or whether you're the manager checking back in with the employee, having that follow-up action plan and being able to see, have there been improvements? If there's not, what can we do? And if there are, wonderful, so I think being able to check back in, then that's going to be, crucial. I think that our listeners can really be able to now turn their feedback into now a valuable tool for growth. As we end today's episode, though, I do want to end with the same final question, which is, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self at the start of your career? Let's hear from Raul.
Well, of course, there may be too many, but I guess the one that I would say is, do not be afraid to share your ideas. Do not be afraid to propose things. It's like when you're at school and the teacher asks a question and you know the answer, but you're afraid to say it because you're not sure, because you are uncertain. And then someone else answers correctly and the teacher goes, well done. Thank you very much. That was the answer. And you get that feeling. Same thing translated to work. I mean, I've seen it happen when I was younger. And it's something that I wish someone had told me. You know what? Do not be afraid to speak up. If you're in the wrong or if your idea is not good enough, nothing's going to happen. Like my friend says, it's only work.
Thank you, Raul. Julia, what about you? What's one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Well, so I've got a couple of tippets, or snippets, should I say. So I think earlier on in your career, it's really easy to hold back, waiting for the perfect moment, more experience or someone's permission. But growth often comes from stepping into challenges before you feel like 100% engaged. So say yes to opportunities, speak up in meetings, ask questions, and expand your network within your organisation. As the saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And this is absolutely true. You need to always ask yourself, who is your advocate?
Thank you, Julia. Okay, so before we close out this episode, are there any resources that you would like to share with our listeners on today's topic?
So there's an article from the Harvard Business Review called Difficult Conversations, How to Give and Receive Critical Feedback by Patrick Thien. And I've got a link that people can go to. And also, so I'm just making a note of this here, it's called Thanks for the Feedback, The Science of Receiving Feedback Well by Douglas Stone and Sheila Hing.
I've heard of that book, the Thanks for Giving Feedback. I'm excited to read that. Raul, what about you? Any resources you'd like to offer our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, not only feedback related, but when I was asked to offer these suggestions, the first one that came to mind that helped me greatly in my work, and I could say certain areas of my life, is the Real Life MBA by Jack Welch. And I think it's co-written with his wife, Jack Welch, a former GE CEO. It's an amazing read. It's very easy to read. It's a large book, but very easy to follow. And it's filled with ideas of the changes he implemented and the things or the way he approached things. And I still remember that book to this day. I have it, of course, but it led me a lot of things that I would think if people were to read it would benefit from it. And there's another one that was not originally on my suggestions list, but I was reading it before recording this podcast, and it's called The Creative Act. It's another book by Rick Rubin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a music producer and it's very famous. He famously produced a bunch of acts. And I thought the book would be focused on the music and the production of albums and whatnot, but it's a very interesting read about creativity and how exploiting it and how approaching things with creativity. And one thing that I found funny is that there's one chapter dedicated to giving feedback. And I was like, I have to mention this in the podcast as a suggestion. Yeah, it's a good read. And I also recommend it, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
Thank you for recommending that. Our team, we have a book club on the talent and leadership development team, so I might suggest that one for our next book club read. So, considering today's episode, I would love to hear your feedback on the Learning Pod. If you are an Epicor employee, please visit our EpicNet page or our LinkedIn account to find the feedback form linked to this episode. Your input is crucial for improving your learning experience with each episode, especially given that season 2 is on its way. Thank you, Julia and Raul, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
And to everyone who tuned in, thank you for listening and always keep learning.